Welcome to the Chess World Cup 2013 in Tromso, Norway. There have been a lot of interesting games, a lot of fighting games and some brilliances. Well, I'd like to share with you one of those most exciting games from this event so far, played by the American Kamsky with the white pieces and Mamedyarov from Azerbaijan. Let's see the opening moves, which I'm not going to spend too much time on. As we can see, first move e4, c5, knight to f3, e6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes, knight c6, knight c3, queen c7. So it started out like a Pausen, but very soon the game is going to transpose more to a Scheveningen variation-like position. f4, d6, bishop e3, knight f6, queen f3, a6, bishop d3, bishop e7, castle, castle. So both kings are castle to the king's side, but that did not stop white to develop an attack real soon. King h1, just to get out of the diagonal from any potential future checks there. Bishop d7, rook a to e1. So far everything is very normal moves. b5, with the idea to then chase the knight away with b4, but that is why white plays a3. Rook b8, knight took on c6, bishop took, and queen h3. So now the game is getting to the exciting stage. Both sides develops. We're in the middle game. So white is about to develop an attack. Black played rook f to d8. Now, this was the first key moment of the game where white could have pushed the pawn to play e5 right away, opening up the diagonal of the light squared bishop from d3. But then black could capture d takes, f takes, queen takes, and white can play bishop f4 to then win an exchange. However, according to the computer, as well as probably the calculation of both players, they felt that after queen h5, even though white wins an exchange, black will have enough compensation, having a pawn and a pair of bishops. And that is why Kamsky here played bishop to d2, preparing that very same idea to advance the e-pawn. Of course, if white would manage to advance that pawn, and then the black knight would need to move away, white could just checkmate then with queen takes h7, king f8, and queen h8. So that is why black needs to be proactive in this position. And he has two ways to continue here. One is to play e5 with his own pawn to stop white's advance. Then the problem is white plays knight d5 and has a very good position. So that is why black played d5, provoking white indeed to play e4, e5, which Gata did play, and now to jump into e4 to block the white's bishop diagonal towards h7. So this is a key moment, very important, that if white would now try to capture and win a pawn on e4 with knight takes, pawn takes, then bishop takes, rook takes, then at the end of that variation white would lose a piece, the hanging bishop on d2. So white had a different plan, and now things are getting very fascinating. White played f5. Now that's a bishop sacrifice, leaving the bishop on d2 unprotected, and indeed Mamedyarov put on the gloves and took the bishop. If instead black would try to take the pawn on e5 with the queen, the plan would be for white to trade knights, knight takes e4, d takes back, and then bishop c3 with a tempo chasing the queen away, and after queen c7, f takes e6, and if, for example, pawn takes the bishop, then after rook f7, black's position is hopeless. Let's go back to the game where after f5, black indeed took the bishop on d2, and now if white plays f6, opening up the diagonal that way, black would play h6, give back the bishop on e7, but have an okay position. So therefore fe6 is the more challenging move. Now, white threatens to take on h7, white threatens to take on f7. Lots of threats. Black needs to be very careful to stay in the game. For example, if black would instead of the game move play h6 in this position, white would respond with queen f5, renewing that checkmate threat with queen h7 check. And now knight e4, white would take on f7 with the pawn, king f8, then queen h7, or if the king goes to the corner, then white can play e6, connecting those two very dangerous pass pawns with an excellent attack. So the game continued with knight e4 after white took on e6, and of course e takes f7, check. The king needs to go to h8, otherwise white just takes the pawn on h7. And now came the next critical moment in this game, a beautiful situation. And white sacrificed another piece, the knight this time. Capturing on e4 wouldn't be as good because black would stay in the game after knight takes, pawn takes, the promising looking rook takes e4. Not because black would capture the rook, but because black first would sacrifice his own rook against the bishop on d3, and only after that take on e4, followed by queen c4, and black is out of trouble. So the good move is, as Gata played, knight takes d5. Now if rook takes, bishop e4 wins easily for white. Bishop had to take, and now rook takes, not the bishop, but rook takes, creating a very pretty threat. For example, if black doesn't see it and plays rook f8 right now, then white has a beautiful checkmate in 2 with sacrificing the queen. Queen takes h7, followed by rook h4, checkmate. Also, if black plays h6, we already know the pattern. Queen f5 creates undefendable threats. The game continued with, after rook takes e4, black playing g6. And now it's a very interesting position. Perhaps white does not have an immediate way to quite win the game, unless black makes a mistake, of course. But white certainly has enough compensation. To start with, white has 3 pawns for the piece. So if I'd have to choose, I'd like white, even though black may be able to hold the game with correct defense. The game continued with rook e to f4. Another option was to retreat the rook to e3 with the same idea, to then threaten to use the pin along the h-file and grab the pawn on g6. Rook went to f4. And now black made basically the probably losing mistake. Black here played king g7. The better defense was to take on e5, and after bishop g6, retreat with the queen to g7. After king g7, white got the opportunity to connect the pawns, advance e5, e6. Beautiful pawns for white. Rook f8, and now queen e3. So now this is a very dangerous threat. If indeed the white queen gets to go to give a check along that a1, h8 diagonal, as white threatens right now with queen d4, black will be in major trouble because the king will need to go out to the open to h6. And that is why black played bishop c5 right now. If instead black plays queen c5, that would open up the e5 square for the white queen. So that wouldn't work either. Bishop c5, queen e1. Now the threat is to go to c3 and give the check. And black made a final mistake in the game by playing bishop d6, opening up the c file for the black queen to control that square. A bit better was bishop to e7. Bishop d6, and now came rook h4 with yet new threats. For example, if black continues here with queen to c6, creating some threats with bishop takes g2, white wins beautifully with another rook sacrifice. Rook takes h7, king takes rook, queen h4 check, king g7, queen f6 check, king h7, and queen takes g6, mating next move. So came bishop e7, trying to prevent this idea. So if now rook takes on h7, then white does not have the queen h4 follow-up. So that's why came a different way of sacrificing the rook, queen e3, with the immediate threat of queen h6. If bishop takes the rook on h4, then queen d4 check, king h6, queen takes the bishop on h4, king g7, queen f6, king is forced to go back out to h6, and then white brings the rook with rook f4 and wins. And black played h5. Now white played queen d4 check, forcing the king to h6. And now a final beautiful combination with rook takes the pawn on h5. Even though black can take it in two different ways, the end result will be checkmate. For example, if pawn takes, white continues with rook f6, or if the king takes, then white can choose to take the bishop on d5, or play queen g7 immediately, and white's attack is deadly. A brilliant game. Well done for Gata.